bit worried the Riddler is in Columpton, driving a Citroen Picasso. Hi, my name's John Corley and I'm here to give you a comparison video, sort of, but not really. But I wanted to discuss kind of the good about the Quad Cortex, the not so good, maybe some of the bits that are a little bit ugly, and also kind of put it in context with some other competitors. It's not going to be a massively long video, I just wanted to talk about a few things and as I see it kind of, I guess, talk a little bit about biases and all of this sort of stuff and actual affiliations with other brands and stuff. So I guess at the top of the video is probably worth saying that I have conversations with people from each of these companies in some degree or another. There's no affiliation, if that makes sense, but I've not been paid by Line 6 to make hardly any videos. I've not been paid by Nora DSP to make any videos, and I've not been paid by Fractal to make any videos. So, I don't know, if I could tell you that the HX Stomp, the Helix stuff, was noticeably better, that would be my kind of inclination. That's where my bias is, I think. I sort of see myself as a Helix defender, and that's the stuff that I like to use. I just also like to use this other stuff and sort of dabble around, put my feet in the water, toes in the water, and behave like a duck. So I was doing some comparisons this morning, so using the same IR and using a PV5150 lead channel on the Quad Cortex, the HX Stomp and the FM3, and also a Diezel channel 4 on each of the devices. So I'll put up some of those clips and stuff. conclusion is that basically you could get away with any of them. Each of them is doing their thing. I don't think anyone stands out as being noticeably, you know, worse or anything like that. But what I will say is there's a tendency towards more kind of heft in the low end with the Quad Cortex and the FM3. The FM3 to the point with the Diesel is kind of over blooming. I think it gives me that kind of feeling. I don't know that necessarily that would be optimal in a mix, because when you normalise them both at the same level, it ends up with the FM3 being quite a bit quieter, because the low end kind of palm muty bits actually kind of spike way louder than the Quad Cortex or the Helix does, or the HX Stomp. That's kind of the tendency with the fractal stuff. And a little bit with the Quad Cortex, there's like a bit more of a spike in the low end, and I think that could be perceived as a positive feel thing, only because I know that the opposite is true. You know, if you were to cut things below 500 Hz, that really feels like awful to play, and it feels like you're not connecting with the thing. It feels like you're playing through a B, essentially. So my conclusion is that roughly you could probably get great tones out of any of these units, and that's been my experience with it. I know that some people have said that they've struggled to get the same results out of the Quad Cortex as they have out of the plugins. I think that's a function of working with a modeler versus working with quite a simple plugin interface. And not only that, but Neural have not actually told you which cabs they're using in the plugins, which would make a huge difference to your ability. You know, so if you know, for instance, that the Pliny stuff is using a clean amp on the clean bit and a PV 5150 on the dirty bit, that kind of solves half of the battle, but it doesn't solve the part where you're choosing a cab. So I think that's probably why people are struggling to get those exact tones, and there's not really a lot you can do about that, because I guess it's tied up money-wise for Neural DSP. They want you to buy the plugins, and they're kind of giving away that piece of information, and you wouldn't really need to buy the plugins if you knew exactly what was going on with the Quad Cortex, because in theory probably most of those sounds are within reach. And I think 3 of the plugins actually just use 5150s. Anyway, I know the Nolly one does, the Gajira one does, and I know the Pliny one does, so, or I think I know that anyway. I think that's the online knowledge anyway. So if you also knew which cabs were paired with each one, you'd probably be able to go without buying those plugins, I guess. I find it really easy to load IRs onto the HX Stomp. I find it relatively easy-ish, but not actually that easy to load IRs onto the fractal stuff. This morning I tried loading this IR on, and it's sort of a little bit of a weird process at the moment. So I think they're referring to a desktop editor that never really arrived. I think that was the plan. There was supposed to be a desktop editor at launch. I went on the Wayback Machine, and as far back as like March or May in 2020, there was the intent that they'd be launching with both the mobile app and PC editor or desktop editor. You have to log into your Neural DSP account on the website, upload your IR there, and then come in here and go into impulse responses or cloud directories or something. Cloud directories, then impulse responses, and you get the option to download it. A little bit convoluted, and that's basically the experience of the cloud at the moment. So in some ways it's kind of cool, and I kind of noticed that on the Andertons video they were talking about how in some ways I think it would be nice to have the option to not have to do this stuff online, especially when some people, I believe, are having considerable trouble staying connected to a Wi-Fi connection anyway. That's not an experience that I've had. I think that's what some people have faced. So for me, in some ways the cloud thing does work quite nicely, in others it doesn't really. Also, one of the really key sort of issues with the cloud at the moment is that there's no way to differentiate, except for by the description, whether you're looking at an amp, whether you're looking at a pedal, or whether you're looking at an amp, pedal and cab, a whole chain. There's no real way to know what that is, and it's sort of the Wild West at the moment. It's kind of up to whoever's uploading to bother to put in the tags. I think probably it'd be best to designate those in at least kind of 3 categories. Is it a pedal? Is it an amp? Is it an amp and a cab? You know, at least those 3 things, it would be nice to be able to differentiate. I don't know whether that's coming in the future. And then one other thing that is really not great at the moment is this IR loading thing. So once you've got the IR in your cloud, you choose it like a mic. So you choose your cab. So I could have a US Deluxe cab, and then I go on that, click the mic, and also turn off the other cab that's on, click the mic to change the mic and load that IR. It's a little bit strange, and it still says at the top that my cab that I've got is the 1x12 US Deluxe, so not exactly, doesn't seem to be finished, that particular aspect. I can't say that I can really sense any deal breakers for people though, except for things like maybe not having a looper. Obviously the Helix has got pretty much every effect you could want, and the FM3 too, as well as all of the amps and all the tonal options that those two share. The FM3 of course has like about 300 amps, so you can really go nuts with that, and all of the power amp modelling and all that stuff that you can get deep dive into and stuff. The other thing is the Helix, you can get into the power amp, you know, changing parameters like sag and bias and those things, as well as separating the actual preamp of the amp out, so you can do lots of creative stuff like that. The Quad Cortex modelling is in some ways quite basic and simple. They don't have any of those power amp parameters in there. Whether that will be coming in the future, I guess, kind of depends on how they've actually gone about modelling those things, which they've not discussed yet. But whether that's an issue for you is completely up to you to decide as well. It's just one of those things that if it's not there at the start, I do wonder if it will ever come. So, you know, are they ever going to put in kind of power amp parameters? If those are things that you use on these other devices, that might be something that you need to know, if you were able to buy one anyway, which I'm not sure you can at the moment. So, does it sound way better than any other device? No. Does it sound in that ballpark with the other devices? I think very much so, yes. Can you get great tones out of it? I think so. Is it simple to use? Well, in as much as a modeler can be, sort of yes, but at the same time, all of the things that you have to do with these other modelers, you're going to have to do anyway, most likely. So if you're used to using high cuts and things like that to get heavier tones that aren't spiky in the top end, you're going to have to do that with the Quad Cortex as well. It's just a function of how these things actually work. And, you know, all of the things like balancing presets, all of these little challenges that come up, and, you know, building signal paths where you've got clean and dirty and managing kind of that stuff, all of that exists too. It just happens to be in the touchscreen device. So I think a lot to like, a few things not to like at the moment, which maybe they'll fix. I do think they've been given quite a lot of leeway, and a lot of people saying, you know, in 1 or 2 years maybe this will be the next big thing. I don't know whether we can say that's true or not, but what we can say is that what they've got here is perfectly decent, and I think for many people will do the job. But equally, the HX Stomp is 400 quid, and for me that's kind of the pound for pound best spend that you could do in the modelling world. And likewise the FM3, to be able to get into the fractal kind of universe without slamming your guitar, you know, that to me presents very, very good value. At the moment, I'm not sure the Quad Cortex can match that kind of value proposition, especially with prices going up and availability not really there at the moment. So, you know, what do you think?